The loud gunshot echoed through the trees like a thunderclap. I was standing on the front porch of our ranch house, coffee mug in hand, when I heard it. One single, sharp blast. Then, a scream. A high-pitched, terrified scream that cut straight through my chest. It was my son, Luke. I dropped the mug. It shattered on the wooden porch. My boots hit the ground running before my brain could even catch up. I followed the scream, my heart thudding against my ribs like a sledgehammer. Down the dirt path, through the tall grass and past the stables, I sprinted. When I reached the open clearing near the fence line, my knees buckled. There he was. Luke, my 10-year-old son, was on his knees in the pasture. His arms were wrapped around his best friend Daisy, his miniature horse. She lay there, motionless, blood soaked into her white and brown coat. The sight of it twisted my stomach. "Dad? Dad!" he screamed, sobbing uncontrollably. "They shot her! They shot Daisy!" I fell to my knees beside them, trembling. I pressed my hand gently against her side. No heartbeat. Her eyes were open but lifeless. Whoever did this hadn't just fired a warning shot, they fired to kill. Before I could process it all, I looked up, and that's when I saw them. Two camo-wearing hunters, rifles slung over their shoulders, casually stepping through the broken section of our fence. One of them laughed, as if this was nothing more than a regular Saturday hunt. "You better not be touching our deer," one of them yelled. That was it. I stood up. My fists were clenched. "That's no deer. That's my son's horse. What the hell are you doing on my land?" They looked confused for a moment, then smug. "She ran out into our line of sight," one of them shrugged. "We had permission to be here. Some lady from the HOA said it was okay." My brain exploded with rage. HOA? Permission? This was private property. This was my ranch. Who in the world gave anyone the right to walk through our land with loaded rifles? The shorter one leaned on his rifle. Said it belonged to the community. Open range or some nonsense. I wanted to lunge at them. But behind me, I heard another cry from Luke, deep and broken. I turned back, knelt beside him again, and wrapped him in my arms. He was shaking so hard I could feel his little heart pounding like a drum. "She was going to perform with me at the school show next month," he whimpered into my chest. "We practiced every day, Dad. Every day." I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. And then, just as I looked up again, I spotted her. There she was, Karen. Her ridiculous pastel sun hat and bright pink cardigan made her stand out like a sore thumb against the ranch's natural browns and greens. She was standing behind the hunters, arms folded, lips pursed, like this was some picnic she planned. She had given them access. She had sent strangers with guns onto our land. And Daisy was gone because of it. I stood slowly, lifting my son gently in my arms. "Go inside," I said to him quietly. "Tell your mom to call the sheriff." He looked up at me with tear-streaked cheeks. "What are you going to do?" I stared at Karen. "I'm going to get some answers." A week earlier, life on our ranch had been peaceful. We'd moved out here 2 years ago, just outside the main subdivision, hoping to raise our kids away from the chaos of city life. We bought a 10-acre ranch, independent, private, and definitely not part of the HOA that governed the gated community 2 streets over. Or so we thought. The trouble started when the HOA expanded its influence. Karen, the self-appointed community coordinator, began showing up at our gate. At first, it was small talk, harmless things. "You really should trim those hedges out front. They're a bit wild." Then it became more controlling. "You're flying a flag that's not in our guidelines." And then just plain weird. "I've marked your fence line on the community trail map." That last one raised red flags for me. She had printed flyers and left them in our mailbox, claiming our fence was bordering public recreational property. A blatant lie. I spoke with my wife, Melissa, about it. She thought we should ignore her. "She's just a bored retiree with too much time," she said. "She can't do anything if we don't let her." That was before we noticed unfamiliar tire tracks near the creek, footprints near our barn, and candy wrappers scattered near our chicken coop. It escalated quickly. 3 days before the shooting, we woke up to find a laminated sign nailed to our fence. Community Wildlife Access Trail. Authorized entry permitted by HOA Council. I ripped it down immediately, but I had no idea what Karen was planning behind the scenes. Turns out she'd told local hunting hobbyists that this part of the land was open access. Undeveloped HOA green space, she called it. She gave out maps. She gave them our gate code. And now Daisy was dead. After I sent Luke inside, I stormed toward Karen. "You let them in?" I growled. She didn't even flinch. "This land wasn't being used properly. It's filled with weeds. We thought it would be a nice gesture to the community." "We?" I asked, fuming. "This is my land. My son's horse just died because of your gesture." She scoffed. "It was just a pony. You people are always so sensitive." That was the final straw. I pulled out my phone and began recording. "Say that again." Her eyes flickered with hesitation, but pride held her tongue. "I said it was just a pony," she repeated. "Good." Now I had her. I didn't say another word. I turned and walked back toward the house, seething. Melissa met me at the porch, her face pale and lips trembling. "Sheriff's on the way," she said quietly. "And Luke won't stop crying." I nodded. My jaw was clenched so tight I could barely speak. "They're going to pay for this," I said. "Every last one of them." The sheriff arrived within 30 minutes, but the hunters were already gone. They had vanished down the hill and into the woods beyond the back of the property. Karen, of course, denied everything. "I don't know those men. I certainly didn't give them any codes." But she didn't know I had the footage. Her voice, crystal clear, dismissing Daisy's death like it was nothing. Later that night, I sat beside Luke's bed. He was holding a framed photo of Daisy. He didn't want to talk. He just stared at the wall. "I'm going to make this right, buddy," I whispered. "I promise." Then the phone rang. It was Officer Ray, the sheriff's deputy. "Mr. Harding," he said, "you're not going to believe what we just found." And that's where everything changed. Officer Ray's voice crackled through the phone, heavy with urgency. "We found something in the woods. You'll want to come down to the station first thing in the morning. Bring any security footage you have." "What did you find?" I asked, holding the phone tightly. There was a pause. "Let's just say those hunters might be involved in more than just trespassing and shooting livestock." I ended the call and sat in silence for a moment. Melissa was watching me from the hallway, worry etched all over her face. "What's going on?" she asked. "I'm not sure yet," I said. "But it sounds like there's more to this than we thought." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my head, the look on Luke's face, the blood on Daisy's coat, Karen's smug expression. I wanted justice. But more than that, I wanted to protect my family. This wasn't just a case of a nosy HOA Karen anymore. This was something deeper, possibly criminal. The next morning I drove to the sheriff's station with the flash drive containing all our recent security footage, from the stables, the front gate, the barn, and even the drone camera we'd mounted last year to monitor our land. When I stepped inside, Officer Ray led me to a back room where a map of our area was pinned on the wall. Red thumbtacks marked several locations near the edge of our ranch. "Your drone picked up these two men leaving the ranch after the shooting," he explained, pointing at the footage. "But it also captured them burying something along the western fence line just before they left." "Burying something?" I asked. "What was it?" "We dug it up," Ray said. "It was a cooler. Inside we found hunting bait and something else, a printed list. A list with GPS coordinates, along with a map labeled Permitted HOA Hunting Grounds, signed by Karen Whitman. I blinked in disbelief. "She made fake permits?" I asked. "Yep," Ray confirmed. "And that's not all. We traced the names on the list. Those hunters are part of a group we've been watching for months. They've been poaching on private land and selling meat under the table. It's illegal. And now that they've crossed state lines and killed a registered trained animal, that's a felony." My jaw tightened. They murdered my son's therapy horse, I said coldly. She wasn't just a pet, she was his partner, his peace. I know, Ray said, and we're going after them. But first we need to hold Karen accountable. You said you recorded her admitting to giving them access? I nodded. I have it on video and audio. Good, he said. Then we can build our case. But fair warning, Karen has money. And lawyers. I returned home with fire in my chest. Melissa met me at the door. What did they say? They found evidence, I replied. Karen's fake permits, her signature. And those hunters? They're known poachers. Her eyes widened. Are they going to arrest her? Not yet. But we're getting close. Luke was on the porch, quietly brushing the saddle that used to belong to Daisy. My heart cracked again. I walked over and crouched beside him. We're going to build a memorial for her, I said gently. Right near the pasture she loved. He nodded. Can I help? Of course. She was yours. That weekend, we built the memorial. A white wooden archway with Daisy's name painted in blue across the top. We placed her saddle on a post, surrounded by flowers from the neighbors. Luke chose a smooth stone from the creek to sit beside it. He called it her thinking rock. He said she liked to sit by him when he sat there to read. The neighbors who weren't part of the HOA came out to support us. Old Mr. Clay brought iced tea and offered to mend the broken fence. The Monroe twins, who were around Luke's age, brought drawings they made of Daisy and hung them on the archway. The outpouring of kindness surprised me. But just as things started to feel peaceful again, a white Lexus SUV pulled up to our gate. It was Karen. She got out like she owned the land, wearing oversized sunglasses and a forced smile. Behind her trailed a man in a cheap suit with a large leather briefcase. Melissa stepped out to meet her first. What do you want, Karen? Karen didn't answer her. Instead, she looked around like she was inspecting the place for resale. The man with her cleared his throat. I'm Harold Grayson, legal representative for the Hillside View HOA. We've come to inform you that your property has been flagged for non-compliance. Non-compliance with what? I asked, stepping forward. Karen finally spoke. The open land on the southern end of your ranch is considered shared green space. You've placed a structure there without HOA approval. My blood started to boil. You mean the memorial for the horse your hunters killed? Karen waved a dismissive hand. The past is the past. We can't have unauthorized buildings on what's technically public land. We'll need it removed by next Friday or we'll be forced to take legal action. I took a deep breath. That land is not public. It's deeded to me. You don't own an inch of it. Mr. Grayson pulled a document from his briefcase. According to these amended boundaries. Amended by who? I snapped. He hesitated. The HOA Development Committee. I narrowed my eyes. So you drew new lines, without approval, and claimed my land as yours? Sir, he said nervously, let's not escalate things. I took a step closer. You already escalated things when your people stepped foot on my land and killed something my son loved. Now you come here and tell me to tear down his memorial? Karen adjusted her glasses, clearly annoyed I wasn't backing down. Rules are rules. And crimes are crimes, I said. And I've got the sheriff, a drone, and your voice on tape. She faltered. For the first time since I met her, I saw fear in her eyes. Then Melissa held up her phone. She had been recording the entire conversation. You're trespassing again, Karen, she said calmly, and you just threatened us on camera. Karen turned to leave, but not before muttering, this isn't over. We watched them drive off. Luke came running out of the house a few minutes later, waving his tablet. Dad, look. On the screen was a message from one of the neighbors, a woman named Stephanie who used to be on the HOA board. It read, I have emails, proof Karen bribed the old board to redraw property lines. She said it was to increase community value. I didn't agree. She forced me out. I looked at Melissa. We've got her, I said. But I was wrong. Because that night, While we were sleeping, someone set fire to Daisy's memorial, and we woke up to flames. I smelled the smoke before I saw the fire. It was just after 3 a.m. when the smell hit my nose. Burnt wood and melted plastic. My eyes flew open. Melissa was already sitting up, coughing. Then I heard Luke's voice from his room, calling out through the smoke. "Dad, Mom, something's burning." I jumped out of bed barefoot, grabbed a flashlight, and raced down the hallway, yelling, "Stay low, get outside, now." Melissa snatched Luke from his room and held him tight, hurrying him out the front door as I burst through the mudroom and grabbed the water buckets we kept for the livestock. I looked toward the pasture, and my knees buckled. Daisy's memorial was engulfed in flames. The white archway was already blackened and collapsing inward. The saddle was nothing but a charred outline crackling in the heat. Luke's thinking rock glowed orange at the base. Smoke spiraled up into the dark sky. I dropped the bucket. "No, no, no," I muttered, running toward the fire with a shovel and blanket, trying desperately to smother the flames. But it was too late. The entire structure had been doused in something. Lighter fluid, maybe. It was burning too fast, too clean, too intentional. I heard sirens wailing in the distance, probably called in by a neighbor. But it didn't matter. By the time the fire truck arrived, there was nothing left to save. The memorial was gone. Luke was sitting on the porch, trembling in his pajamas, wrapped in Melissa's arms. "Why do they hate us so much?" he asked through tears. "Why would someone do this?" I crouched beside him, heart shattered. "I don't know, buddy," I whispered. "But I swear to you, we are not going to let them get away with it." By 6 a.m., the sheriff's office had cordoned off the scene. Yellow tape flapped in the early morning breeze. A deputy named Carla knelt to examine the scorched grass and found the melted base of a red plastic gasoline can. "It was arson," she said. "Deliberate." Officer Ray arrived shortly after, rubbing his face in disbelief. "I was hoping Karen would stop at fake maps and trespassing," he muttered. "But this? Burning a child's memorial?" I handed him the footage from our drone and yard cameras. We'd upgraded the surveillance just after the first incident. That night, our back-facing camera caught a blurry but recognizable figure walking up to the memorial with a canister in hand. Karen. Even under a hooded coat, her signature designer boots and bright pink scarf gave her away. Ray whistled. "She's cooked." "We press charges now?" I asked. He hesitated. "We will. But with the HOA lawyer involved, it won't be easy. She's going to claim it was someone else. Maybe say the footage is faked." "Well," Melissa said coldly. "Then let her try to explain the email leak we got from Stephanie." Ray looked intrigued. "What leak?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the message Stephanie sent us. The emails clearly outlined how Karen pressured the former HOA board into redrawing property maps, offering them luxury spa weekends, dinner cards, even covering mortgage payments. One email literally read, "Don't worry, the ranchers won't fight back. They're too soft. We'll say it was always part of the green trail." Ray's eyes widened. "Now that is a federal crime." He looked at me and smiled grimly. "We're going to burn her down legally." That morning, we met with Stephanie at a coffee shop off the highway. She was in her early 50s, wore a simple blazer, and looked like someone who hadn't had a good night's sleep in years. "I'm sorry it took this long," she said. "I should have spoken up sooner." "But Karen? She's dangerous. Not just because she's sneaky, but because she truly believes she's doing the right thing, even when it destroys people." "She targeted us from the beginning," I said. "I know," Stephanie replied. "She hates anyone who doesn't play by her rules, and you made the mistake of being independent." She handed us a flash drive. "Here, that's everything. Use it however you want." Back home, Luke was unusually quiet. He spent most of the day inside, staring at the ashes of Daisy's memorial through the living room window. Later that evening, I walked in and found him with a small notebook. "What's that?" I asked gently. "I'm going to rebuild it," he said. "Even better this time." I smiled, fighting tears. "Can I help?" He nodded. "Okay," I said. Then let's do it right, and we'll make sure no one ever burns it down again. But just when we thought we were ready to fight back, another letter arrived. Certified mail. Official looking. Melissa opened it and gasped. I took the papers from her hand and scanned the contents. Notice of property violation. Unauthorized business activity on HOA grounds. A formal complaint has been filed citing illegal use of land for livestock training, therapy services, and community disruption. My stomach twisted. They were accusing us of running an unlicensed animal therapy center, using Daisy as a cover, and threatening to fine us $5,000 per day until we vacated the land. I nearly tore the paper in half. Are you kidding me? They're doubling down? Melissa looked sick. They're trying to bleed us dry. They know Luke's horse was registered as a therapy animal. They're turning it against us. I shook my head. This isn't just revenge. This is war. That evening, as we sat around the dinner table, trying to hold on to some sense of normal, Luke broke the silence. I want to speak at the town meeting, he said. Melissa and I looked up. You? She asked. He nodded. I want to tell them what happened to Daisy. Maybe if they hear it from me, they'll care. I reached across the table and held his hand. Then we'll be right there with you. The next day, I called a meeting with Officer Ray, Stephanie, and a neighbor named Ted who had a background in land surveying. I need to prove this ranch was never part of the HOA, I told them. I need maps, deeds, soil samples. I don't care. If I'm going to court, I need to go in with a hammer. Ted pulled out a rolled-up document. Good news, he said. This ranch, it's not in any HOA zone. I pulled the original plats. Karen drew her own lines. What she did was illegal and dumb. Stephanie added, with this and the emails, she's toast. And then Ray dropped the biggest bombshell of all. She won't just face civil lawsuits, he said. Arson, conspiracy, trespassing, fraud. This is going federal. I exhaled deeply. But just as we stood to leave, a neighbor ran up the gravel path toward the house. Her eyes were wide. She's not done yet. What do you mean? I asked. She just called an emergency HOA meeting. The topic, motion to seize your land through community vote and issue a forced injunction to evict you. My hands clenched. They're trying to vote us off our own land? The woman nodded. And the vote is tonight. I looked at Melissa. This ends today. And we all jumped into the truck, racing toward the HOA clubhouse. What we didn't know? Karen had already arranged for Luke to be silenced at the meeting. The HOA clubhouse was packed when we arrived, far more than usual. Cars lined the narrow street, and voices buzzed from inside like a hive ready to swarm. As I pulled into the last available spot, Luke sat in the back seat, clutching his notebook. His face was calm, but I could see the nervous twitch in his fingers. Melissa turned around in her seat and smiled. You've got this, sweetheart. Just speak from your heart. He nodded silently. I stepped out and scanned the crowd. Karen's Lexus was parked crooked near the front, as if she believed rules like parking didn't apply to her either. A group of HOA loyalists stood near the doors, clipboard holders, mostly older folks who treated their HOA title like a royal position. But scattered through the crowd, I also saw our allies, neighbors who supported us, people who came to Daisy's memorial, Ted, Stephanie, Mr. Clay. I exhaled and led our family toward the entrance. But the moment we got near the front door, a tall man in a gray jacket stepped in front of us. He looked official, HOA badge hanging from his collar. Sir, ma'am, he said. We're sorry, but minors aren't allowed to speak at this meeting. I blinked. What? No children permitted to address the board, he continued. New bylaw amendment. Emergency vote passed earlier this afternoon. Melissa scoffed. You can't be serious. He's here to tell the truth. They killed his therapy horse. I understand, ma'am, but rules are rules. There it was again. That phrase, Karen's favorite weapon. Then let me speak, I said, stepping forward. But before he could respond, Karen appeared. "Oh, please don't make a scene," she said, her voice like syrup. "We're trying to have a civilized conversation. We wouldn't want the child to feel overwhelmed." Luke stepped around me, standing tall in front of her. "I'm not overwhelmed," he said. "I just want to talk about Daisy." Karen leaned down, smiling in that smug way of hers. "Sweetheart, it's just a pony." Melissa grabbed Luke before I could react. "Go inside, Dad," she said. "We'll wait here. Do what you have to do." I stared at Karen, then at the board members behind her. "You've made a big mistake," I said. "Let's get this over with." Inside, the meeting had already begun. Karen stood at the front of the room behind a podium, addressing the crowd like a queen scolding her court. "And so, due to repeated violations, unapproved land use, and the recent fire hazard caused by unauthorized structures, we propose the immediate injunction to seize the Harding Ranch under emergency HOA compliance. All in favor?" "Hold it," I shouted. Heads turned. A ripple of whispers spread across the room. I walked straight up the aisle, holding a stack of documents under my arm and a flash drive in my pocket. "I have evidence, proof this HOA has no legal claim over my land, and that this woman, Karen Whitman, falsified property lines, committed fraud, and is personally responsible for inciting criminal trespassing and arson." Karen laughed. "Oh, please. Are we really going to let baseless accusations derail a lawful vote?" Stephanie stood up in the crowd. "They're not baseless. I was on the board. I saw everything. I have the emails." Ted joined her. "And I have the original maps. The Harding Ranch is outside HOA jurisdiction." Officer Ray walked into the room next, holding a folder. "I'm from the Sheriff's Department," he announced. "We're launching a full investigation into Ms. Whitman. Anyone who votes with her tonight may find themselves complicit in a federal crime." The room fell silent. Karen's face turned pale, her mouth twitching. You can't prove I—" "Oh, but we can," Ray said, holding up the flash drive I gave him. "With video, audio, emails, and land deeds." The HOA president, a timid man named Gerald, slowly stood. "I think we need to table this vote until we conduct a full review." "You cowards!" Karen screamed. "He's lying. He's turning you all against me." Someone near the back yelled, "You told us they were squatters." Another voice shouted, "You lied about the map." Chaos erupted. Half the room stood arguing. Gerald banged his gavel. "Meeting adjourned until further notice." Karen charged toward the exit, but Ray stepped in her way. "You're not going anywhere. You're under investigation." Outside, Luke was waiting on the steps. He looked up as we came out. "Did it work?" I knelt beside him and smiled. "Better than we hoped." He hugged me tightly, but our victory was bittersweet. The damage had been done. Daisy was gone, our peace shattered, and though Karen's hold on the HOA had started to crumble, she still wasn't in handcuffs. Not yet. Over the next few days, more evidence poured in. Multiple residents came forward with complaints against Karen. Apparently, we weren't her only targets. She'd harassed a family for having wind chimes, tried to evict a veteran for installing solar panels, and even fined a couple for their too colorful flower garden. But the most shocking revelation came from a man named Ed, a former board member who had quit 2 years prior. He brought forward a recorded phone call. Karen's voice clear as day. "The ranchers don't matter. We'll make their lives so miserable they'll beg us to buy them out. Just imagine, a golf course where that pasture is, a yacht club at the creek." She had never cared about rules. It was all about greed, and now she had nowhere left to hide. 2 weeks later, Officer Ray showed up at our door with a paper in hand. "It's done," he said. "The county DA is moving forward with charges. Fraud, trespassing, conspiracy, and arson. Karen's going to court." I exhaled deeply. Melissa hugged me. Luke jumped up from the porch swing and cheered. But Ray held up a finger. "There's one more thing. She filed a counterclaim. She's suing for emotional distress. Says your son slandered her." My jaw dropped. "She's suing Luke?" Ray nodded. "It's a last-ditch move. Desperate, but we're not letting it slide." I looked toward the pasture where Daisy used to roam. She took his horse, I said. She tried to take his voice, but now... I turned to Ray with a quiet, furious resolve. She's going to hear it louder than ever. Because the town had decided to let Luke speak after all. At the next council meeting, his name was the first on the list. And this time there would be cameras, reporters, and a courtroom watching. And Luke? He was ready to tell the whole world what HOA Karen had done. The town council meeting was held in the local civic center, a bigger venue than the HOA clubhouse. Word had spread like wildfire after news of Karen's charges hit local papers. HOA leader faces fraud and arson allegations was plastered across front pages and online news feeds. People wanted justice. But more than that, they wanted to hear from the one person whose voice had been silenced the longest. My son, Luke. The night of the meeting, the Civic Center parking lot overflowed with cars. News vans lined the curb. Inside, every seat was filled. Some people stood along the walls. Community members, ranchers, city folk, teenagers in boots, old women with thermoses. It was like the whole town showed up. Luke sat in the front row with his notebook clutched in both hands. He wore his cleanest flannel shirt and his dusty brown boots, the ones he used to wear when training Daisy. He looked small in the crowd, but his eyes? His eyes were steady. Melissa rested her hand on his shoulder. You're going to be amazing. He nodded. I'm ready. When they called his name, Luke stood up, walked to the podium, and unfolded his notebook. You could hear a pin drop. He looked around the room, then at the board, then finally directly into the camera filming him. My name is Luke Harding, he began, his voice clear but soft. I'm 10 years old, and I live on the ranch that HOA Karen tried to steal. A few people chuckled nervously. He continued, I had a miniature horse named Daisy. She wasn't just a pet. She helped me talk when I didn't want to. She made me feel safe at school. I used to be scared of people, but with Daisy I could do anything. I even entered a horse show for kids. Luke's hands trembled a little, but he pressed on. One day she was out grazing near the fence, just like always. And then, someone Karen let onto our land shot her. They said she looked like a deer, but she was wearing her pink halter. And they shouldn't have been there. A murmur rippled through the room. Reporters scribbled notes. Luke swallowed hard. When she died, I felt like someone ripped a hole in my chest. We built her a memorial, but someone burned it down too. And I know who did it. Now the silence was deafening. Luke looked straight into the camera. I just want people to know the truth. I'm not trying to hurt anyone, but I don't want this to happen to any other kid, ever. Please don't let people like her keep doing this. He stepped down slowly. The room was still. But then someone started clapping. Then another. And another. Within seconds, the civic center erupted into a standing ovation. Luke looked overwhelmed, but proud. And Karen? She was sitting at the back, lips thin and eyes narrowed. For once, she didn't speak. She didn't dare. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. I opened my inbox. Over 300 messages. Supporters from across the country had seen the clip of Luke's speech. People offered to send us another miniature horse. Local vets emailed offering free therapy animals. A ranch supply store sent a gift certificate. One woman who had grown up with a similar experience wrote, Your son has more courage than most adults I know. Even better, our attorney called with the update we'd been praying for. She dropped the counterclaim, he said. Too much heat. Her lawyers advised her to back off before it got worse. I laughed for the first time in weeks. So what happens now? She's still going to trial. But with the public behind your son, she doesn't stand a chance. We rebuilt Daisy's memorial together that weekend. This time, the community helped. Mr. Clay brought cedar wood for a stronger arch. Stephanie painted a new nameplate. Daisy, forever our light. The Monroe twins brought solar lights that glowed softly at night. Ted helped install cameras on every corner. And Luke? He planted wildflowers all around it. This time, he said, no one can take it away. But just when we thought the worst was behind us, a black SUV rolled up to our gate. It wasn't Karen this time. A stern man in a blazer stepped out, flashing a federal badge. "Mr. Harding?" he asked. "Yes? We need to talk. It's about the hunting permits." I frowned. "The fake ones Karen made?" He nodded. "Yes, but there's more. We've discovered she sold over 60 unauthorized access licenses to hunting groups across state lines. That qualifies as organized land fraud." Melissa stepped out onto the porch, holding Luke's hand. The agent glanced at her, then back at me. "I'm here because your property is now considered federal evidence. Until the investigation concludes, you'll need to appear as a key witness in multiple hearings. There's also a possibility that more of her network will come after your ranch." I clenched my jaw. "You mean people she invited?" He nodded. "She told them you were squatting on abandoned ranch land. Some of them paid thousands of dollars to hunt here. We're dealing with a fraud ring, Mr. Harding." I looked out at our land, peaceful, quiet, but no longer safe. "So what do we do?" He stepped closer. "Protect your family and get a good lawyer." That night I installed more cameras, reinforced the barn doors, and placed a shotgun by the front door. Not because I wanted violence, but because I wouldn't let anyone take from us again. Not our land, not our peace, and sure as hell, not my son's healing. The next morning, a convoy of hunters rolled up to the edge of the ranch. They claimed they were just here to use their permits. I stepped outside with the sheriff, the agent, and a stack of signed federal orders. "This land is private," I said. "And you were scammed." One man got angry. "I paid $8,000 for season access." "You paid a con artist," the agent replied. "You're lucky we're not pressing trespassing charges." Karen had done more damage than we realized. The fraud went deeper. Her charm, her smile, her HOA title, it was all a mask. Now, that mask had crumbled, and behind it was a woman who was about to face the consequences of a lifetime. Karen was arrested 2 weeks later. It didn't happen quietly. She was hauled from her house at sunrise in front of cameras, reporters, and half the neighborhood she once ruled. No pastel sun hat, no clipboard, just handcuffs and a long coat over her pajamas. The charges: wire fraud, trespassing, criminal conspiracy, destruction of property, endangering a minor, arson. Her face was plastered across news sites. Her mugshot went viral, eyes hollow, lips trembling, the smugness finally gone. Luke saw the headline on his school iPad and quietly turned the screen toward me. "They got her," he said. "Yeah," I whispered. "They got her." But even with her gone, the mess she left behind was far from over. More angry hunters came forward, demanding refunds. HOA members resigned en masse. Board meetings turned into shouting matches. Some of Karen's allies tried to distance themselves, claiming they had no idea. But emails and paper trails told a different story. Stephanie helped the county open a full audit of HOA funds. Turns out, Karen had been siphoning money into fake improvement projects, ones that only benefited her inner circle. They even found a hidden wildlife grant she forged in the name of Daisy's memorial project, then burned it down to cover the trail. She wasn't just a nosy neighbor. She was a full-blown scammer, and now the whole town knew it. We were asked to testify at her hearing. Luke insisted on going. He wore his best jeans and a clean white button-up. He stood in front of the judge with confidence far beyond his 10 years. "She said my horse didn't matter," he told the court. "But Daisy mattered to me. She helped me find my voice, and when they killed her, I didn't want to speak ever again." He paused, then added, "But I did. Because other kids might have animals like Daisy, and people like her shouldn't be allowed to hurt them." The courtroom was silent. Even Karen, sitting with her lawyer in the corner, couldn't meet his eyes. The judge cleared his throat and looked directly at her. "Ms. Whitman, you didn't just break laws, you broke trust. You took advantage of your title to enrich yourself, harm your neighbors, and silence a child. For that, there will be consequences." and with the bang of a gavel she was denied bail and ordered to remain in custody until her formal sentencing. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. One woman crouched in front of Luke with a microphone. "Young man, what do you want people to remember from all of this?" Luke thought for a moment, then said, "That even small voices can be loud when they're telling the truth." It made the news that night. People reposted it over and over. Some called him the ranch kid who took down the HOA queen. But for us, it was never about revenge. It was about peace. Back on the ranch, things finally started returning to normal. Melissa and I dug a new foundation for Daisy's memorial. This one was made of stone and cement, covered in colorful tiles painted by kids from the community. Luke led the ribbon-cutting ceremony. He even sang a little song he'd written about her. We adopted another miniature horse too, a gentle, honey-colored mare named Buttercup. Luke trained her himself. She followed him like a shadow, but no one could ever replace Daisy, and that was okay. One afternoon, while painting the fence, I noticed a group of men in suits pulling up to the edge of the property in a black SUV. I tensed, but this time, they weren't here to fight. They introduced themselves as reps from a National Animal Therapy Foundation. "We saw what your son did," one of them said. "We think your ranch would make an excellent pilot location for therapy horse training. Fully funded, fully protected." Melissa covered her mouth in shock. "Are you serious?" They nodded. "We want to help make this a place where healing happens, not just for your son, but for others like him." 3 months later, we launched the Daisy Strong Foundation. We offered free therapy sessions for kids with anxiety, PTSD, and learning differences, just like Luke had once faced. Word spread quickly. Families came from across the state. And you know what? Karen's old HOA clubhouse? It got shut down. The building was repurposed, now a community barn library with books, maps, and a memorial section for animals lost to cruelty and neglect. One wall was dedicated to Luke's speech, etched in metal letters. Even the same officials who once ignored our complaints started volunteering. Funny how truth changes everything. On the 1-year anniversary of Daisy's death, we held a candlelight vigil. Dozens came. Some brought flowers. Others brought their kids' therapy animals. Luke stood by Buttercup, proud and tall. He gave a short speech. "Daisy showed me that small things can change the world, so I'm going to keep trying to do the same." He looked out across the crowd. "And I hope all of you will too." As candles flickered in the night, the crowd whispered her name. Daisy. 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 And far away, in a cell without windows, HOA Karen watched the broadcast through a tiny screen. For the first time in her life, the world wasn't listening to her. It was listening to the boy she tried to silence. And that was the loudest justice of all. 6 months after the trial, everything had changed. The ranch was thriving, not just as our home, but as a safe place for others. Kids who'd once been too shy to speak now laughed while brushing ponies. Veterans dealing with trauma visited the barn just to sit quietly and feel peace. Families from out of town donated feed, books, and supplies with handwritten notes. For Daisy, she mattered. The Daisy Strong Foundation had become more than a local program. It became a movement. Schools partnered with us. Therapists reached out for collaboration. Even local law enforcement asked if they could bring troubled teens by for community service. Luke? He'd grown, not just taller, but bolder. He gave speeches now, in libraries, at community halls, even once at a regional conference for youth mental health. People asked him, "How did you do it? How did you stand up to someone like Karen?" He always gave the same answer. "I didn't do it to be brave. I did it because no one else would. And I knew Daisy would have wanted me to." But peace, as we had learned, is a delicate thing. And it didn't last forever. One chilly November morning, a man in a cheap blazer showed up at the gate. He wasn't from the government and he didn't introduce himself. But I recognized him. He was one of the original hunters, the ones Karen had given false permits to. He never got charged. Said he was just following directions. Now he stood at my gate, arms crossed. "You ruined my reputation," he said flatly. "I lost my license, my clients, and my side business." "You trespassed on private land and shot a child's therapy animal," I replied. "You should be grateful you didn't end up in jail." His eyes narrowed. "You think this is over?" I took a step forward. "No, I know it is. You and your friends aren't welcome here. This land is protected now. We have eyes everywhere." He spat on the dirt. "Enjoy your circus of a ranch. You're going to slip. And when you do..." He didn't finish the sentence. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the morning fog like a ghost. That night, I reviewed every camera feed, every gate, every pasture corner, every stall. I wasn't afraid, but I was prepared. Melissa stood beside me in the barn with a flashlight. "You think he'll come back?" she asked. I nodded. "Maybe, but he won't get far." Luke stood in the doorway holding Buttercup's reins. She nuzzled his side protectively. "If he comes back," Luke said, "I want to be the one to call the sheriff." We all laughed softly, but the tension lingered. Days passed, then weeks, and then, one night, a new threat came. Only it didn't come on foot. It came through paper. A thick manila envelope arrived in the mail, addressed in blocky handwriting. Inside was a letter from a corporate law firm representing a new developer. They claimed they had purchased rights to a portion of the land adjacent to the HOA and were reviving Karen's old project proposal, a luxury development that would incorporate the Harding Ranch into its recreational master plan. My hands shook as I read the fine print. They were trying to do it again, only this time with money and muscle behind it. I looked at Melissa. "They're trying to buy us out. Again, with a fake claim." She scanned the letter and pointed to one sentence. "Failure to vacate the contested acreage within 90 days will result in litigation." My jaw clenched. "We're not moving. Not now, not ever." That night, we called our lawyer, the sheriff, and Ted, the surveyor. "Let's put them back in their place," I told them. "One more time." Stephanie returned with copies of every previous ruling. Ray brought the sheriff's report, and Ted came with updated scans showing exactly where our land ended and the so-called development began. It wasn't even close. The developer's claim was based on forged documents. Again, they'd bought lies thinking we'd sell out quietly, but they didn't realize we were no longer afraid. We'd faced worse. 3 days later, we held a public press conference on the ranch. Reporters stood among the horses. Luke stood in front of the barn with Buttercup. "This ranch belongs to my family," he said into the microphone. "It doesn't belong to any HOA, or Karen, or company. It belongs to the people who live here, who work here, who heal here." The cameras rolled. The internet lit up. The same way Luke had started this story. He was now finishing it. And that night, the company backed off. They realized they were standing in front of a wall they couldn't tear down. Because when a kid stands tall for something good, people listen. 1 year later, we received an official letter from the county courthouse. The Harding Ranch had been designated a protected agricultural and therapeutic zone. No HOA, no hunting, no development. Forever. The final page had one line: "In honor of Daisy the miniature horse, and all those like her who help heal what cannot be seen." Melissa wept as she read it. I folded the letter and slipped it into a frame. Luke hung it on the barn wall, just above the memorial, right next to a photograph of Daisy in her pink halter. And underneath it, carved into a wooden plaque, were the words that had changed everything. "Even small voices can be loud when they're telling the truth." And now, that truth would echo forever.